Respondent fatigue is a theme that we hear across all different kinds of customers that we have here at Question Pro. We have about 20,000 clients who are running somewhere on the order collectively of about 3 million surveys a week. So, with all of that, we get a lot of feedback about what people are doing. And one of the questions we get asked the most is, what can I do to increase my response rates? And, we believe that, your survey isn't just about collecting data. It's actually about engaging your customer or engaging your respondents. And in fact, the more successful initiatives we see, and something that I've done in my career as well, is treating surveys more as part of customer engagement, part of a customer experience. So it's not just what you're doing on that one-time survey. It's about a process over time that you engage people, and if you're doing it right, actually you can hope to increase your response rates over time, because people see the collection of information not just as taking a survey, but actually as part of their experience with your brand or product. So response rates aren't just about getting you more data. They're actually about increasing the overall engagement of your customer base, at which point, market research really isn't research. It's really marketing. And something that I did, I'll talk a little bit about this later, at Lego, was we treated survey engagement really more as closed loop marketing. So today we're going to specifically focus on a few simple things that you can do to increase your response rates. And collectively, these should probably stand you in good stead to significantly increase your response rates. They're simple things, although it's surprising how often people neglect them. So it's worth reminding you of these, and we'll also be adding in some other tips and tricks along the way that you can use to increase engagement and boost your response rates. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, who's going to take you through some of these bullet points.
Hello, and welcome to you all. First of all, I'm sure that you all are wondering about the MIP and why someone who deals with microscopes is sitting here talking to you today about how to increase response rates. We've been doing market research. This is actually our 25th year, and I am involved in an analytical instrumentation group that is extraordinarily poorly reported. I think you can understand that if a company is going to invest $1 million or more in the development of a new instrument, data is critical, and yet these companies often will go either to a few professors down the street, or they'll rely on what I call tribal wisdom. They'll just kind of talk to a few sales and marketing folks and think that that will be sufficient to really get the hardcore data to launch a product. We found the most reliable source was the voice of the customer, and that's where we have focused for the last 25 years. So based on that 25-year experience, I'd like to talk to you about these 5 keys for building your response rate. They involve, very simply, your list, the survey itself, how you deliver it, the invitation that you extend, and also sharing the results. The holy grail here clearly is to get good response rates. Why? Larger numbers clearly mean better statistics, but also we find that larger numbers allow us to parse data so that we can see the results from different perspectives. This allows us to help input to the R&D part of a company, business development, as well as sales and marketing. Next slide, please, Brad. The first thing we'd like to talk about is your list. We like to keep it simple, KISS. We use Excel spreadsheets to maintain our lists, although we do have CRM for other activities in our business. But we find that this allows us to update, change, and adapt as the need occurs for each individual study. In that list, we typically have first name, last name, email, and a series of custom fields that allow us to sort by company activity or some critical, especially in this day and age of spam compliance, to keep that list clean. And there are a couple of very simple checks that you can do. In Excel, there's a text-to-column function that you can use to separate the email into the first part, which has the name, and the last part that has the address. When you do this, you can check the name against the name of the person and make sure that there are not spelling errors. And also the last part of the name allows you to check for things like .com, .edu, whatever, extraneous periods that might appear. So we find that often missing letters and strange symbols are easily spotted if you separate the text into columns. A third tip here is to keep it fresh. If you use your list frequently, you'll see what bounces and what goes through. That means less maintenance on the list. But of course, you have to be very careful not to overuse your list. A trick here is to use Bright Verify, which is a company that for about a penny a name will check your list. It's a good first place to start and is recognized by many of the mail delivery and survey companies. Finally, it's important to segment the list. Clearly, the same information is not relevant to everybody, so we always make sure that we use those custom columns to send the survey out just to that group that would have interest. For example, we wouldn't want to send a basketball study out to someone who's following hockey. These quick tips make a big difference both in the deliverability and in your response rate. Next, please, Brad. Let's talk a bit about the survey itself. We opt for using multiple choice questions on most of our surveys, and we've made that decision based on the fact that multiple choice gives us numbers as our data rather than using text boxes which produce bulky, unorganized collections of words. Numbers clearly are easier to analyze. They allow us to spot trends very quickly and to run statistics. That being said, it's always important to include an other or fill in the blank block. We always find a surprise on every survey that we do among these other data. There's always something that our test audience perceives that we didn't think of, and that other block gives the participants a voice. We also find that it's very helpful.
Barbara, if I could just jump, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just jump in here, I think this is important to recognize that when you're talking about engaging respondents, certainly there are questions that you want to ask for which you want answers, but it's probably the case far more often than not that there are a lot of things your customers want to say to you, and they may not be, the questions that you're asking, they actually may have answers to questions that you never thought to ask. So giving them the room to be able to do that is really critical. And we'll come back to that later because how you respond to their responses also contributes strongly to their sense of engagement. Sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
And I really strongly agree with that. We've found, again, there's always a surprise. And I've been in microscopy now for 30 years. People come to me and they say, is this product going to sell? And my counsel to those people is always, let's see what your customers are going to say. And it's their voice you really want to hear. So I agree with what Brad has said. So going on to huge tables. If we think about the survey from the participant standpoint, whatever encourages them to move through the survey quickly and efficiently is going to encourage them to participate and engage. And the result, of course, is going to be much better quality data. There's another company in the analytical industry that specializes in huge tables, and I never can really understand, number one, how they analyze and how they're able to make correlations between who's answering what. But second of all, they have one table after another. And I taught high school chemistry for 15 years. I know that kids do better when they can go through a test quickly and easily. And these huge tables just slow people down and frustrate them. What we've also found is that we can run slightly longer surveys with more questions on them if the participants perceive that it's quick and easy. So they'll tolerate more questions if they can move through them rapidly. Next, please. The third key to good response rates we found is deliverability. And there are several components here. We have seen a trend over the last year or two toward going toward what I call naked emails. And those are just the email part of this string that you see. And we've also found that there's been a tremendous impact on both the deliverability and response rate of using a naked email versus one that has a first name and last name merged in the string. By the way, I'll tell you, Question Pro is one of the few companies that now offers this feature. We have left other companies, including Survey Gizmo and SurveyMonkey, because they no longer offer the ability to merge first name and last name. The impact on deliverability is huge. First of all, we know that naked emails get stopped by spam filters. This is such an important problem that MailChimp actually has an article in its knowledge base about how to make it through Apple spam filters. And their advice, use merged, first name, last name, email. The second part of this equation is the response rate. When people receive a naked email, just their email, not their name, they perceive the message as spam or advertising. And they're not even likely to read your subject line. They're just going to stop at that point. And clearly it has a big response rate impact. How big? We've done A/B testing, and the difference can be as much as 0.5 to 1% response rate using a naked email to 10 to 15% response rate using merged emails. So it's really a profound difference. Next, please. Brad, can we go to the next slide? Thanks. Next, it's important to make the invitation inviting. Don't just say, take part in my survey. We find this is almost like a headline. You need to have something which is short, snappy, intriguing. We use things like 10 quick questions that, whatever, or intriguing new XYZ. What do you think? Or give us your input.
Yeah, make it about them if you can, not about you. It's not what
Right.
you want to know. It's about, put something in the subject line that says, tell us what you think about this.
And as part of that, it's really important to use a salutation. That's, again, part of making it by them. Say, Dear Mary, not just Dear Colleague or Dear Client, whatever. From the flip side, we found that it's really important to tell them who is delivering the survey and to use a name if you can. All of our studies at the MIP go out over my name. We say, this is from me, Barbara Foster. Call me or email if you have a problem. And this has made a huge difference in our deliverability and response rate. However, if you say call me or email, you need to monitor your computer to make sure that you are following up on that. Again, what's the difference? It's a matter of security and familiarity. People are more secure in giving you information if they know it's going to a person and not just an anonymous entity. And second of all, if you're delivering surveys over and over again, there's a familiarity. It's really a riot for me to go to a trade show, for example. I've become the famous Barbara Foster because people know that I send out these kinds of surveys. And they'll say, oh, that's who you are. And they'll tell me honestly that they take studies that come out over my name that they would not normally participate in. Now, another tip is to embed the first question in the survey within the email. And Brad is expert about this. So Brad, over to you.
Yeah, this is something that
Brad,
we offer with
before you,
Question Pro.
Brad, sorry to interrupt you. A couple of
Yeah.
questions which have popped up for Barbara in the last little while. I thought it might make sense for Barbara to just address them as we go on. Can I shoot them to you right now, Barbara?
Sure.
Okay, so one question from Gina McNeil is around your questions around, she wants a little bit of clarification around what you mean by huge tables. Is that grid questions or is that something else?
Yes, grid questions. Grid questions, bulky ranking questions. If you're going to do a ranking, have a slider or do whatever you can to make it easy. Make it a short table and not one of these things that is maybe like a 5 table wide by 10 lines long. Those kinds of things just slow people down.
Got it. Thank you so much. There are two more questions which were around the spam piece of it. So what's your experience been with Outlook and Microsoft in terms of email deliverability, specifically around your merge tag point which you brought up? And
I can't.
this is from Brian. Go
Thanks
ahead.
for your question, Brian. I don't know specifically, but so are you talking about not being able to send out through?
We just lost you there for a bit, Barbara.
So Anouk, why don't you hold the questions until the end?
Will do. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, yeah,
So
Brad,
let me
go
go
back
back
to
to
that
the
first question.
yeah.
Yes.
So on embedding the question in the email, I mean, you may have sensed a trend through what Barbara's been going through, which is, I mean, those of you who are familiar with direct marketing or email marketing are familiar with the concept of the funnel and moving people through a funnel. And the idea is that, you know, if you can remove points of friction at any stage of the process, you increase your response rate. Or you increase the likelihood that somebody's going to click or interact. So, you know, having the right list at the beginning, making sure that it's deliverable, that you're not going to run into spam filters, the more people that you can successfully get the initial survey out to, the better off you are. Making the survey more accessible and more welcoming increases the likelihood that they're going to click and open that email and move into the survey. Another piece of it is, rather than say, take my survey or tell us what you think, click on this link and go to the survey, there's a little bit of friction in there, right? You know, you're taking the chance that they will in fact want to click on the link and go to the survey and then start the survey. A way of removing part of the friction in that process is embed your first question in the email itself. So when they open up that email, the first question is there, very easy for them to respond. If that first question is a critical question, so much the better, because if you've got people who drop out you know, through the survey process, at least you've captured something at the beginning. There's a screen here that we're showing. It's putting a net promoter question into the email, so that at least, you know, if you do use NPS, that's a way of capturing it right away. But you've engaged them; they've stepped into the survey, and maybe they're ready to do more. So then, what you've done is increase the likelihood that, you know, once you've got them at least a little bit hooked with that embed, that they're going to continue, and that is something that that we do offer through Question Pro. Okay, Barbara, you ready to go on?
I'm ready. The final key that we'd like to share with you is to share the results. With the kind of work that we do at the MIP, I can't share results with the participants. We do engage them by making sure that we post the winner of the drawing on our educational site. So people do know that they aren't just answering and the data is going off into a black hole. And we thank them also for contributing to the development of new instrumentation. But we do share with our clients, and we try and provide interim snapshots. Again, this is a matter of not just launching the survey and having it go off into a black hole, but keeping them involved in the loop as the data develops. If the optimum situation is to allow them to download dynamic reports as the data is building. And the result of that is that we have now bred a whole new generation of data junkies. And I'm happy to say it also increases our business because they feel part of the process all the way through. So that's what we do on the client side. Brad, talk about the participant side.
Right. So I'm going to talk from the standpoint of my experience with consumer brands and specifically with Lego, which is, I think particularly over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, with the advent of social media in particular, that there's a lot more of an expectation on the part of consumers that information is a two-way street. That marketing and surveys have migrated over time from being a monologue from the brand to the consumer, and now it's a dialogue. And part of that dialogue is they're happy to share information with you, but they want to know that you're actually doing something with it. So there are a lot of, it became very trendy for a lot of companies to say, we listen. Listening is not enough. It is no longer enough. You've got to demonstrate that not only are you listening, but that you're actually doing something with the feedback that you get. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. So I'll give you a couple of Lego examples. When we relaunched Lego.com in the year 2000, and we realized that we had millions of people coming to the site, and we really wanted greater insight for the direct-to-consumer product development. So I had, a piece of the company's product portfolio. I could get about, I don't know, 60 or 70 different Lego sets made each year that were not going to be retail sets. But I wanted to figure out exactly what was it that would do well in the direct-to-consumer channel. And so rather than, say to people, here are 5 sets that we could make, which one do you want? A multiple choice question. What we actually did was we allowed our participants to share their ideas with each other. And what we did was we did surveys as, in some cases, a series of campaigns. So we would ask one question about sort of, say, play habits. What is it that you like to do? What was interesting at the time was that we had sort of general, kind of like meta market research saying, kids are getting older younger, which was a way of saying that, once upon a time, say, girls played with Barbies until they were 11 or 12 or 13 years old, and suddenly they were dropping Barbie at age 5 or 6, or boys were playing with, cars, toy cars to a certain age, but then they were getting lured into video games, shorter attention spans. Kids had, their Game Boys, and they only wanted to consume toys or play objects for maybe 15 or 20 minutes at a time. So market research was saying we need to have smaller sets at lower price points because people are not looking for the lengthy play experience. And we actually did a series of interconnected surveys that we would take the input from one survey and then we would share that input with the subsequent survey. So what was happening was that ideas were coming from consumers, and we were re-exposing those ideas to other consumers. So we were not only hearing them, they were hearing each other, which was pretty novel at the time. And what we actually heard loud and clear was that while there was a place for the Game Boys and the short attention span, what people really liked about Lego was, taking a big tub of bricks and spilling it out on the floor and imagining what could be created, and then spending hours and hours and hours building. And if you have kids, or if you do it yourself, and it's perfectly okay if you're an adult to play with Lego, I still do, that you can, you really want to take your time building something spectacular. So we actually use that research to develop product lines that went against the received wisdom. We started building increasingly larger sets and offering those to the market at increasingly higher price points. And they kept selling very well, and every time we put out one, we do another series of interactions, and again, using the input from the consumers to help guide us directionally where we were going. And I know Barbara said earlier, ask multiple choice questions, and you absolutely should, and it certainly is cleaner and easier to look at data. But my dirty little secret is that I love verbatims. I love those open text boxes. I love hearing what people are saying. And not only that, but saying, if we start seeing a trend, to re-expose some of those verbatims to other people to see, is there really something here? Can we come up with some ideas that a large number of respondents glom onto? So one of the things you want to do when you're sharing the results is, in the same way that Barbara talked at the beginning about segmenting, when you segment a survey and you send it to, a certain, directed portion of your audience, like for example, there were there are people who build trains out of Lego. So we would do surveys entirely devoted to Lego trains. We would keep track of who responded, and then we would, after the conclusion of the survey, and we got the information, we would loop back to that group, not the whole list, people who didn't respond, although sometimes we'd include them as well, but certainly for the people who responded, that we'd go back to them and say, hey, we heard some great ideas from you. Here are, 5 or 10 that really caught our eye, and here's what we're going to do. So that showed, that we were listening, that we were doing something with the feedback, we were bringing it back to them, and so, with the increasingly immersive sets, that was a series of about maybe 10 or 15 surveys conducted over probably a 90 to 120 day period, and then with additional surveys conducted as products were produced in response to some of the results that we saw from that. So we treated surveys actually not as surveys, but actually as a closed marketing loop. That people would respond, we take the input, we share the input, we do something with the results, like create a product, and then we go back and see were we still on the right track. And the ultimate a result of that was at one point I went to my product group and said, all of the data that we're getting, all of the verbatims as well as the multiple choice data, is showing that people really, really want immersive Lego experiences. They want something that they're not going to spend 15 minutes on. They want something they're going to spend 15 hours on or 50 hours on. So what I want you to do, my product group, is build me the most spectacular thing that you can think of, and then I will figure out how to sell it, because we've got this real directional insight from people that they want something really immersive. So the product group came back with the Imperial Star Destroyer from Star Wars, which those of you, again, who have Lego will know, you may remember that set. It was quite large. It was over 3,000 pieces. It was the largest Lego set ever created at the time. And my product manager freaked out and said, we can't sell it. And I said, why not? We've got all sorts of research. And by the way, these sessions that we were doing were we were getting something on the order of 30 to 50,000 respondents per session. The information that we had shows that people really, really want products like this. We don't know that specifically they want an Imperial Star Destroyer, but they have never seen anything like this before. And he said, well, the company's pricing formula says that we have to charge $300 for it, and Lego had never brought anything with that kind of a price point to market before. So I said, we're going to do it. I believe in the results that we've had. I went to manufacturing and said, here's the set we're going to build. And they were kind of shocked by it, but said, okay, it's your funeral. And we want you to place an order for what you're going to need for the next year, because we don't want to have to keep making this set. So I was the optimist. I placed what I thought was what we were going to sell over the course of, say, the next 12 to 15 months. They thought I was nuts and I was going to have a warehouse full of Imperial Star Destroyers. It turned out that we sold that production run, what I thought was the annual production run, we sold that in the first 5 weeks. And then we actually had to remanufacture twice before Christmas to keep up with demand. And today, if you go on Lego.com or you get a Lego catalog, you will notice that there is an entire product line now devoted to high-end, expensive Lego sets. And the reason that that exists is not because somebody internally said, let's make really expensive sets. It's because we got research over time that really showed us that people were looking for that kind of an engaging experience. And the fact that we kept engaging people throughout the process, what happened was that we actually did almost no marketing for those products. The marketing that we did, particularly through the first phase, was through the people who had participated in the survey sessions. And we would say, this product is coming, tell your friends. You guys gave us the input on this. This is your product as much as it is ours. And when you do sort of an engaging process like that, where you share the results and you tell people what you're doing with it, and they feel as if they've got a stake, they were part of this process, they will be out in front carrying the torch for you. So, I know I come at things, less from a pure market research and more from a marketing and a customer experience development and a community development background, but really having that kind of interaction with your customer base, with surveys as a really critical tool. It can be fabulously impactful when you share the results. Now, you don't have to share the exact results. I'm not saying, send out spreadsheets, ask people to check out the crosstabs, all the rest of it. It's really about that top level about, we heard you, here's the stuff that we really heard, that, sort of like the top ideas in there, and here's what we're doing. So it's basic stuff, but it's really, really important. And once you've demonstrated to your respondents that you have listened and that you are responding, what that does is, this is like an investment in future results, because once they know that you're going to take those results seriously and you're going to apply them into making the brand better, making the product better, you've just increased the likelihood significantly that they're going to participate in your next survey. So, this is something that I strongly, strongly believe in, because, at the end of the day, I've been in marketing and advertising and customer experience for a long time. I started my career on Madison Avenue writing television commercials, and again, it was monologue, and that was very frustrating. But back then, sort of all the marketing you could do was what the brand said. It was all about, we want to say this. Now, marketing and advertising is primarily customer to customer. Word of mouth is more important than it's ever been, and certainly social media in particular provides a megaphone that allows people to share their experiences, not just good but bad. And recommendations obviously go a long way. Witness again the rise of Net Promoter as a very valuable metric. So the degree to which you can engage your customer base, I'm thinking about it as a process, and as something that you develop over time, and not thinking about surveys as one-time only core samples. This is what builds engagement with the customer base, and this is it's the point at which market research crosses over into marketing, and market research becomes increasingly valuable to the marketing initiatives within a given company. So let me move on. I think, Barbara, we just want to wrap up here, right?
Yep. Well, I want to make one comment about what you just said, because the reason I got involved in market research in the early days was because of a colleague of mine who was an MIT graduate engineer who was propelled. He was working with a man who had developed a new product in the medical device arena, and this second man had spent a tremendous amount of time doing this and had not had any engagement from the potential customer base, and the product failed abysmally, and as a result, unfortunately, he committed suicide, and my colleague Ralph was propelled into being the market manager. Like overnight, he walked in the next morning and they said, guess what? And he developed something called the M to E ratio, which is a ratio between getting to know your customer and what drives them and what interests them and what they'll buy, versus the dollars spent on research and development. And he found that the breakover point is about the current breakover point is actually between about $1.25 getting to know your customer versus $1 spent on research and engineering. And I think, Brad, that you just proved that point in spades because of this cyclical market research that you were able to do and the engagement that resulted from that. You were able to really short circuit and save money in research and development of technology. The risk factor dropped dramatically, and you were able to come out with an absolute gangbuster product. And I think that that's the real impact of doing market research and getting that voice of your customer, hearing what they are saying, and the new direction toward getting them engaged and having it move into marketing is really a huge advantage. With scientific instrumentation, I don't know that we can do it because it's typically still a 1 to 2 year development process, but I think there are a lot of other venues in business where that's going to have a lot of impact. So just to bring things to a conclusion, we've talked about your list, we've talked about ways to optimize your survey, how to uh, bring your customer into the loop by addressing them by name, making you a visible entity on that study so they have that security and familiarity, making the invitation inviting, and then finally sharing your results. And with that, I think these are 5 keys that definitely will build a response rate. We suspect more than 300%. We'd love to hear from you, obviously, to see what you've implemented, and we'd like to hear also any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Barb and Brad. We have a flurry of questions which have come up in the last little while. And while you were talking or responding to a query, Barb, there was some audio issues at that time, I believe. Some of the respondents could not hear what you had to say. And I had three more attendees who have asked the same question around, very interesting question, which has been coming up again and again around Outlook. And what's your experience with delivering emails using the technique which you just told around, or you spoke about the mail merge and the effect of that in an enterprise which runs Microsoft mail clients, Outlook. Any insight
So
there?
this is actually on the delivery side. Is that correct, Anouk?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Again, when we've delivered surveys, it's typically been to very large groups on the order of 10,000 and 20,000 at a time. So we have relied on our survey provider for delivering those surveys rather than going through Outlook or any other more immediate desktop application.
Got it.
I'm probably dodging the issue, but that's what our experience has been.
Okay. Question for both of you, I guess. It's coming from Ben, last name G. Around there seems to be a contradiction around what Brad said around him being involved, him asking for more open-ended comments, and Barbie pointing out, hey, if you want to increase response rates, you have to talk about uh, get questions which are more quantitative, I guess, with radio buttons and checkboxes. What are your thoughts around those? And how do you actually sift through these large surveys with a lot of open-ended comments? Do you use word clouds? What do you find useful?
I'll answer part of that question and I'll leave part of it to Brad. Um, if you're going to ask for personal input with text boxes, my recommendation is that you keep the survey very short, 4 or 5 of them at a time. Again, you need to think about the participant. There's in teaching, there's an old adage that the mind will only tolerate what the seat will stand. In other words, kids get antsy in their seats and they won't learn very well if things go on and on. So we have found the multiple choice questions the most powerful for us. And again, since we're looking to test a large audience, and we want at least 300. So the magic number for us is about 370 participants. That gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 3% because microscopists are a fairly homogeneous group. But we typically would like to see 1,000 participants in a given study because it really allows us to see trends very quickly, and it also allows us to parse the data. We're interested, for example, in analysis by title, so we run chapters of data where we take a look at what professors see, which is very different than what an engineer or lab manager might see. We want to take a look at another chapter of data by type of laboratory that they are in because academic labs respond differently than industrial labs. We will also want to see things like discipline. Obviously, a biologist is going to be different than a chemist. And so for us, we want things in numbers. When it comes to the text boxes, we typically are looking for things like applications or other comments. And I actually go through and I hand code all of the other comments to see if there are secondary trends. But we're likely to get maybe 50 to 75 other comments, so we're still not dealing with huge amounts of data. But at that point, I'd like to turn it over to Brad because, Brad, what do you do if you have 30,000 people responding and they are verbatim responses. How do you handle that bulk of data?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly it's a challenge. I mean we would have I mean I like to go through some of the stuff personally. I had a market research team that was going through the respondents as well. I mean we use also branching logic in a survey to you know some people might get verbatim open text boxes. Other people might not. Based on what path they were taking through the survey. So there are ways of managing the input. Um, but it's there's a lot of sort of there are some applications out there that you can run stuff through to find common words. Somebody asked, do we find word clouds useful? Yes, they can be. The challenge to that is you kind of have to know what are the words that you're looking for, or the other problem is it's the thesaurus problem is like somebody says fruit and somebody else says peach. They're really talking about the same thing, but they're using different words. Word cloud isn't going to do much for you. So there's I'm afraid that the best answer for that is there is no replacement at this point for the human mind to be able to go through and see what's going on. But on the other hand, whether you're doing it yourself or again, I had a market research team, but I also had my product managers going through the results as well, because I don't believe that sort of you know research is something that needs to be wholly only exposed to the research team. If ultimately you're going to have a product team or a marketing team or somebody else who's going to be using those results, rather than giving them a summary, expose them to what's coming through.
And by the way, just a simple approach along those lines is if the data typically comes down in an Excel spreadsheet, and if you just do an alphabetical sort on that column, you can sometimes just scan through and see, depending, I don't know again with 30,000, but with results on the order that we get, it's easy to scan through and see if there are clusters of information.
Great. Thanks a lot, Barb and Brad. There's some feedback, there's some comments coming from Z Johnson, who's actually suggesting quite a bit of tool sets which you could use to see themes in verbatim. Word IJ, or Wordage, I don't know how that's pronounced, plus GEPHI, Gephi, can be used together to see themes in verbatim, and she's used that successfully in the past. Thank you very much, Z, for posting that. There's a lot more questions. I'm going to pace myself so that we can finish this in the allotted time. Question goes to both. I think this is addressed to both of you again, from Cherry Yogi, or on mobile surveys, and do we have to what's your experience with mobile surveys generally in terms of response rates? Is there something we have to do uniquely around mobile surveys to help with responses? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take a quick swipe, first, Brad. So we actually do market research to find out the best way to reach our customers, these end users, and we found that most of them do their work. Like I think it was something like 90 or 95% are still doing their work at their computers, so it's not an issue for us. But I want you to know that we know that based on market research. So, Brad, what are your findings?
Yeah, well, two things on this. One is when you are mobile, it becomes even more imperative that the survey is as short as possible, because people using their phones in particular are not going to spend a great deal of time responding to a lengthy survey. So I would say, you want to do something that can be done in 3 screens max. They want to respond and get out. The other piece of it is determining what should be mobile and what shouldn't is actually in some ways a demographic cohort function. So if you're wanting to talk to anyone up from say like teenagers to somebody in their say like early 30s, those people are going to be heavy mobile users, even to the exclusion of desktop. Um, they're very, very app centric. Sort of, I would say people from their, say, like mid-30s on up, they're going to be more likely to be desktop users. But as Barbara said, if you've contacted people in advance, or if they've been able to express their preferences about how they would like to be contacted, obviously you want to include that. If you're going to non-customers, or you've got a sample that you want to go to, it's useful to know, um, not just you know not just having the email address, but actually having some of that demographic data, because I can tell you right now that I have kids in their late teens, college students, and they the amount of time that they actually spend on a computer screen is relatively low. The amount of time that they spend on their phones is astonishingly high. So if if and it's not it's not making phone calls, and by the way, it's not on Facebook. I don't know, nobody's asked specifically about that, but do you do surveys on Facebook? Facebook in the last couple of years, they've lost more than 25% of their audience under the age of about 25, because that's just not where people are anymore. That behavior has changed. So it's I would say if you can stay on top of behavioral trends and device usage, that you could find that very, very useful in determining how you want to target a survey.
Thank you so much, Brad. A specific question around the product from Philip Brunain, and I will wrap this up after 3 more questions. Hope you guys can stick on with us. Philip Brunain is asking the embedded email, embedded NPS in email feature, is that available in Question Pro? I'll take that on. It is available in Question Pro on the enterprise platform for now, and we will eventually roll that out for the other versions. But for now, it's only available on the Question Pro enterprise platform, or the enterprise license. Question for Brad. The next one is around closing the loop, and how do you actually go ahead closing the loop after you collect feedback from surveys? What channels do you use for that? And again, how do you close the loop with? Do you close the loop with all the respondents, or do you close the loops with the ones which you can actually take some action on? How does it actually work? I'm gonna roll into the next question too, Brad. It's around the similar kind of question from a different participant around sharing data. What kind of data do you share, and how does that affect closing the loop? So both to you.
Yeah, I'll take the second one first. So that, again, as I said earlier, it's sort of like the point is not to share sort of a deep dive on the results. It's situational. I mean, you may want to say, we weren't afraid of saying, hey, thanks for participating in our Lego product experience survey. We had 50,000 people participate, and here's what we heard. But it wasn't sort of like 100 of you said this, 500 of you said that. It was really, here were the best ideas or the best concepts, or overwhelmingly people said this. So it's really very, very top line kind of stuff. But it's not just about, again, sharing, like what those results were, but then specifically saying, here's what we're going to do. Like, for example, with as we move towards the Imperial Star Destroyer, we said, people overwhelmingly have expressed an interest in a deep immersive Lego building and play experience. So, we're going to start looking at building products that really provide that. So we, and we, as we got closer to the product itself coming out, we dropped more hints. But it's really more a matter of, closing the loop is, we've heard you, here's what we've heard, and if you can, here's what we're going to do. And so that's on the closing the loop side. How do you close the loop? With Lego, pretty much we did everything through email and through the website, as well as Lego has a pretty active fan community, not only online but actually in the physical world. And there are quite a number of Lego fan groups. They have conventions. So sometimes we would take the results of a given survey, and I would go to one of these fan conventions, which typically had anywhere from several hundred to tens of thousands of attendees. That like there's one called Lego World in Europe, which they get I think it's something on the order of 30 or 40,000 people attending or more, and I would do not only question and answer sessions, but I would always, sort of close it with saying, we've been talking to a lot of you. Here's what we've heard. So I would say your biggest bang for the buck is going to be email and your website. If you've got a decent amount of traffic for that, probably email first, website second, and then if you do have physical events. That's a good way also of disseminating kind of what you've heard, and also obviously the in-person conversations that you can have is simply a reinforcement for we're asking, we're listening, here's what we're doing.
Thank you, Brad. Last question. Again, I'm going to bundle this up for Barb here. The question is around what tips can you provide us for personalization in emails, number one? And number two, could you help summarize the key points which we would like to take out from this webinar, again from the same person, and she apologizes she joined late for the webinar. Go ahead.
Okay, the personalization, I think the most important mindset for you to have is that you are sending out that email to another person, and it's not just going out to a big group. So again, if you first of all do the mail merge in the send to field, so it's going to Mary Smith, then her email, and second of all to include a salutation, Dear Mary. Third, again, indicate who's sending out the study. So in my case, I'll say that it's coming from, we use our training group MME, so I'll say it's coming from MME, but that I am the person. My name appears at the bottom of the study. It is as though I was sending a personal email to that person, and I'll say thanks in advance for responding, Barbara Foster at the Microscopy and Education site. So I think that those 3 points, the send to field, the salutation, and the fact that they know that it's coming from a live person, are perhaps the most important in terms of really getting them past that barrier of thinking, well, this is just some autonomic big monolithic company sending this out. So I think, again, the more you can create that affinity or that person-to-person contact, the more likely they're going to respond to you. And what was the second part of the question?
Just the summarized tips from the webinar, Barb.
Right. So first thing was the list. We want you make sure obviously that it is clean, that it is segmented, and again, just a tip that we use. Excel as a way of just managing it. We find, especially with really large lists, that that's very convenient. The second thing is on the survey itself to keep it short. Again, we prefer multiple choice questions because of the nature of the work that we do, but we always provide an other or text box to get those verbatim answers. The delivery, we said it was really important, again, that you do the mail merge and the mail merge, the salutation, and the fact that it comes from a real person. With regard to an invitation, make sure that it's cute and snappy, not just, oh, well, we want you to get to, please take part in our survey. Make it about them. We want your input. We want your point of view. And finally, with regard to results, for when we do business to business for these surveys, and we want the results to go to our client interactively during the study itself, Brad has made the very important point that they do serial surveys, and they want to share, here's what we heard, here's what we did as a result. And I think that that's an amazing new tool to be used in marketing. So those are the 5 quick keys.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining this webinar. Just like I pointed out earlier, we would share this deck on our website at questionpro.com/blog. And these questions which haven't been answered would be in the FAQ list, again on the website. And feel free to browse and come online and ask for the questions, or send an email to questions@questionpro.com. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.